All right, so I figured I would continue reading Humphrey's Creepy Crawly Camping Adventure. And we left off on chapter 4. Is that right? Yeah, chapter 4. So I think there were 2 more chapters left. This one was Out of the Shadows. Before I read this, though, I want you to turn and talk to somebody at your house. And I want you to tell them, first of all, who Humphrey is. Who is he? And what kind of adventure is he on right now? Tell me a little bit about what's going on. I'm going to back up to give you a sneak peek here at this last chapter. This is kind of going to be your picture clue to see what was happening. What did they see in the grass? What was in the grass? And what do you think is going to happen next? So why don't you just take a minute and tell your family a little bit of background about what this story is about, what's happened so far. Okay, go ahead and wrap that up. And let's keep reading. Out of the shadows. And then it was quiet again. I knew there wasn't a real snake in the yard, but I didn't like being alone in the tent. What if the girls forgot about me? What if they never came back? I heard someone walking through the grass. A light was moving around the yard. I was about to dive under my bedding again when I heard Heidi's dad chuckle. "So that's a problem," he said. I climbed up to the top of my cage and looked out through the tent flap. Mr. Hopper was holding the toy snake in his hand. "Girls," he shouted, "it's safe to come outside again." A minute later, Heidi and her friends appeared. "Here's your scary snake," Mr. Hopper told them. "It's made of rubber." "Those boys are awful," Miranda said. Heidi agreed. "That was mean." "It wouldn't be a good camping night without a good scare," Heidi's dad said. "You'll be safe now." The girls returned to the tent and sat around the table again. "I'm sorry we ran off without you," Say told me. "We were so scared." "Let's think of a way to get back at the boys," Heidi said. "We could throw the snake back in Richie's garden," Miranda suggested. "That wouldn't fool them," Gail said. "It has to be something really scary." The girls were quiet again as they tried to think of a plan. I tried to think of a plan too. But I didn't really like thinking about scary things. After a while, Heidi turned on the music again. "Let's not let the boys ruin our fun," she said. Soon the girls were dancing to the music and laughing. Then Heidi's mom came out to the tent. "Time to get into your pajamas and brush your teeth," she said. Heidi grabbed the big lantern as the girls followed Mr. Hopper back into the house. Mrs. Hopper back into the house. After they left, it was quiet in the tent. It was lonely in the tent. It was unsqueakably dark in the tent. Once in a while, I heard the boys laughing and whispering from Richie's yard. "Girls," I heard Seth say, "let's take the..." Then Art said something I couldn't understand. Uh-oh, it's gonna happen. All the boys laughed. Richie said, "That will scare them." It sounded as if the boys were planning to scare the girls again. But since the girls weren't around, they'd only end up scaring me. The word "me" there is italicized. As I sat there in the dark, I noticed that Gail's flashlight was still on the table. I thought about the lock that doesn't lock on my cage. Humans always think it's tightly locked, but I have a secret way to open it. I knew it would be dangerous to be outside my cage, especially in the backyard. But if I could just switch on Gail's flashlight, the tent would be bright and not so scary. I jiggled the lock and the door opened. I headed straight for the flashlight. It wasn't very far away. Getting to the flashlight was easy. Turning it on wasn't easy at all. There was a button on the side, which I pushed and pulled. The light didn't come on, so I jiggled it and joggled it. I heard a little click. Suddenly, light shined on one side of the tent. I felt much better. As I walked back to my cage, I passed in front of the big circle of light. The light was bright, bright, bright. So I turned my head toward the side of the tent. To my surprise, I saw a very large, very shaggy, very, very, very scary thing. Eek! I squeaked. I raced toward my cage. The scary thing raced across the side of the tent. I turned and ran in the opposite direction. The scary thing turned and ran in the opposite direction. I stopped and sat still. The scary thing stopped and sat still. Thumpity, thumpity, thump. My heart was pounding until I realized that the scary thing was... What do you think it was? Turn and tell somebody. Let's see. The scary thing was my very own shadow. I could hardly believe my eyes. Who would think that a small hamster like me could look so large and scary? I heard the boys scuffling outside the tent. Shh, Art said. Shh, Richie said. I knew they were planning something creepy and crawly, but maybe I could scare them first. I stood in front of the flashlight and got up on my tippy toes. Then I lifted my paw in the air and opened my mouth wide. I was happy to see that my shadow didn't look like a hamster at all. It looked like a huge and horrible monster. I looked like a huge and horrible monster. It was fun to look big for a change. I opened my mouth even wider and roared. Of course, all that came out was squeak, squeak, squeak. It was quiet outside. I figured the boys hadn't seen my shadow yet. I needed to get their attention, so I looked around. Near me was a little box that made music. I turned it on, and the music blared. I wonder what you think blared might mean. What would make sense there? He said, it made music, and I turned it on, and the music blared. Let's keep reading. I reached way up and pawed the air like a scary monster, and I crossed my toes and hoped that my plan would work. Wonder how a hamster would cross his toes. It'd be a funny sight. Oh, we're going to stop there. The next chapter, the last one, is called The Trouble with Monsters. So he crossed his toes and hoped that his plan would work. I wonder what kind of plan that Humphrey is going to have here for the boys. What do you think he's getting ready to do? Why don't you turn and tell someone? Next time I'll read the last chapter and we'll see what happens at the very end. Thanks for listening.